So welcome to the Nerd Pod. Still working out the kinks. But yeah, I have a wonderful guest today. Goes by the name Michael Allen. Is it a EA or AE?
It's EN or AE for
AE.
Michael. Yeah,
Is that more popular?
it's
Or
more
is-
common.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, usually I just have the guests introduce themselves. We're not famous yet, so
I'm famous. I don't know about you.
would like to, give a little shout out to yourself and then kind of move on from there.
Okay. So first of all, Austin's setup is legit. So if you guys ever have an opportunity to come and check this place out, it's legit. So my name is Michael Allen. There's a whole host of things. I mean, what do you want me to talk about? Like,
I'll ask questions.
Okay.
Just basically highlights maybe of your life, where you started, where you're from, where you're at now.
yeah. So I've been in sales. That's kind of been like my primary role for the past 10 to 11 years. I've been in all sorts of different sales, mostly medical sales. So I've sold anything from devices. I used to manage a phlebotomist team and x-ray techs. Then I went into pharmaceuticals. I've done digital marketing. Most recently, I did pharmaceutical sales as well. And then most recently, I've done cosmetic injection sales. So it's been the healthcare industry as a whole over the last decade. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of like my primary role. I can talk about my past, like where I came from. Born in Colorado, but I feel like I've had so many different lives throughout my I'm 35 years old, but I've had so many different lives because I've lived in so many different states and different settings, and broken family, divorced family. So I've kind of just lived in so many different areas. I've lived in Texas, Colorado, Washington State, Idaho, Montana. So I've kind of been all over the place. But yeah, so I kind of have a diverse background, and my dad was a blue collar guy doing construction. He owned a construction company. So I grew up doing like hard labor work, and his whole thing was like, use your brain, don't do what I did, go out there and get an education. And then, do use your brain essentially. And so did that. And my mom's in the healthcare field. So she's been a physician's assistant for the past 20 years, and she was in nursing. So I kind of have that background. And yeah, it's kind of a little bit about the start of me.
Love it.
So
I always ask, if you go back to your 18-year-old self, that was young little pup Mike, right?
That's right.
What is the biggest, not saying like invest more Bitcoin or invest in like futuristic things, but what do you think is like seems like a little nugget that you'll give your daughters, but like, what do you think that little nugget would be to yourself to kind of like help yourself mature, to where you're at now, of like what you like about yourself, anything come to mind?
So what I would tell my 18-year-old self?
Yeah.
Man, I was completely different. I mean, again, coming from the background that I came from, I was pretty lost. I moved into my dad's place when I was 13 years old. I was the first kid of his that actually like lived with him for a long duration of time. So, I'm 13. I'm going into like high school, don't have much guidance there. And so the thing that saved me was sports. So I played a lot of sports, and I had a lot of really, really good mentors and coaches. But in the off season, I was all over the place. And so me at 35 is completely different from what I was at 18. And so I think the thing that I would tell myself at 18 right now would be, it's going to be okay. And just wade through these times, and it's going to be okay. And I think like I was very shy at 18, and so I kind of wanted to just be back in the corner, but I also like had this athletic ability, so I was kind of in the spotlight a lot. I was the jock, I was in that kind of crowd, so it was kind of like the both ends, and I was kind of playing both sides of the fence on that. But normally I was a very shy and quiet kid, so I think I wanted to like hide from a lot of the issues in my childhood years. But I would just tell myself it's gonna be okay.
That's funny. That's the best answer. It's like it's scripted, but it's funny because like that simple, it's gonna be okay, took me, 33 years to like understand what that meant. Biblically it says it, in all mental health like books and everything. It basically just mimics, the Bible, but it's gonna be okay. So yeah, no, that's the best advice I think you could have said if you're looking for validation.
I just think it's really important. Like, and you can't really experience this until you get older. Like, you have to go through, like I heard this saying, wisdom, we all get older, but you don't accrue wisdom unless you actually learn through those times. So you can have wisdom when you're really, really young, or you can have wisdom when you're really, really old. It's not an age thing. It's like how you come across in the world and like how you reflect yourself to the world of your experiences. So I felt like I had to grow up really, really quick when I was a kid. Just my parents got divorced when I was 5. There's like a lot of situations in my childhood where I felt like I had to grow up really, really quickly. And yeah, man. So that's kind of an interesting topic.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I kind of had the same upbringing in the sense of like, lost, felt like I was like the adult of the family, even though I'm the youngest. Learned what not to do from, my entire family. But growing up too quick actually became my weakness when I'm older. It's trying to get results as quick as possible. It's trying to do just enough just to get by. A lot of complacency. So I guess were you dealing with the same thing where like growing up too fast almost hurt you, where like, what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. I mean, I think the blessing that I had was an older sister. So she is 4 years older than I am. She kind of took that motherly role for me. And so she's always looking out for me. And still to this day, like she's constantly just looking out for me. She'll call me and just be like, hey, are you okay? Like, where are you at? What's going on? And, I'm a grown 35-year-old man. I don't need that, but it's really, I'm grateful for it. So she's always kind of been that person for me to kind of support and love on me. But there was this time in my life where like we went our separate ways. And so, she got together with a guy fairly young. They traveled the world, did their thing. And so like we just both went our separate ways in life. And then kind of full circle now, she lives very close to me. And so now we've kind of rekindled that relationship. But I mean, yeah, I think like when I moved to Montana, that was like a transition of, not having that motherly figure there. And so I kind of had to figure it out myself and grow in that. And it took me a long time. And I'm just now actually getting to the point where it's like I feel comfortable with myself. I know who I am. I've done a shit ton of education, like, personal development, stuff like that. So I feel really comfortable with who I am. And that, I think confidence in that is really, really big, especially for men.
Yeah, shout out to Danielle.
Yeah.
She's a stud.
Yeah, she's a big supporter.
Yeah.
Love her.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, it's funny because, we go back, but even just, I've known you off and on throughout, 10 years.
Yeah, it's been about a decade.
But yeah, just seeing even myself grow up, you grow up even like from week to week. I grow up day to day. But it's just really interesting just to see us getting into that, like, we understand the truth and like we can block the noise that doesn't align with the truth. So I think it's like, I feel like sometimes I'm just getting too old, where I'm like, feel retired sometimes, get off my lawn a lot of the times with the
I feel
young
like that all the
pups.
time too, man. Like I feel like I'm in an 80-year-old body, but I'm like 35. So I have this like old man mentality, but it also helps out in your relationships. Like to your point, like I think our relationship, me and your relationship, has grown over the last couple of years just because like we're getting more comfortable with who we are, and what our standards are, and what we stand for in life. Yeah. And now our relationship is thriving. And I've hung out with you a few times recently, and we've had phenomenal conversations. And it's awesome to have that. Yeah, and more transparently, I love that we were so competitive, but we did battle of like dick measuring contests, and most of the time I was the winner, but we'll start it again. But it's funny though, because like you said, when you love yourself first, then you actually want others to do better than you, because you kind of know your identity. Maybe you're put on this earth not to make $1 billion, but like if it's someone else's goal, you can actually promote things that like maybe once in the day, like I'd be like, I'm going to be a billionaire, professional bowler, professional baseball player. You got so many damn hobbies.
Yeah, I got a lot, and I wanted to be, and I think that's the humbling piece too, is like at a 220 house shot, which means nothing to anybody listening, but
unless you're a bowler.
Yeah, well, yeah, which no one's listening in bowls, but basically, it's a very forgiving shot. And then I went up to the pro shot, and it's like the oil I forget I just took a coaching from like a professional bowler. A lot of metaphors there was basically like saying like the PBA shot oil pattern will show your weaknesses, where house shot, you can get lucky, with every shot really. So you don't have to be, specific. And so it's very humbling. He said a lot better, but it's very humbling though it definitely shows your weakness when the oil is more, professional.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a, great metaphor for life where, if you're not focused on the things that matter, like my family, myself, basically those two drive the entire world for me. So like my competitiveness is more hobby, fun, but then I can turn it off. I used to not be able to turn it off. That's where like we would butt heads. But now I can turn it off, and then I can be like, wow, like that was very immature of me. I might be competitive with, my kids and, how I parent. And so it kind of, I guess, shifted. But yeah, I guess what do you still find yourself being competitive about, and like your hobbies? I know you're a big investor and stuff, but like how do you form certain things in your life while also being a good dad, being a good husband, being a good faithful man?
It's a deep question, man. Yeah, I mean, that's the challenge as a man, especially when you start getting a family, you start having responsibilities, you start having a corporate job or the job that you have, whatever that may be. It's like, how do you find that balance? And I think like the answer to a lot of things in life that I've found is balance. As long as you have that balance within there, it's hard to stray off and go a certain way.
And so, sorry to cut you off. Balance is I've been trying to like articulate balance to me, because everyone says that, but at the same time, it means something completely different to you than it does to me. So can you like explain what balance means?
I think it goes back to your standards. Like you have to everybody has their own set of standards, and it's going to evolve over time, but your standards equate to who you are. It's like going back to like what you said, the foundation. Like if your house is built on a rock, no matter the wind, the waves, all that stuff, you have a strong foundation. And so those people that don't have standards, don't have that balance, their house is built on sand, and they tend to crumble and have issues a lot more in life. So I think your standards as a man is so important to know, again, who you are, what you stand for. And that's like with your kids, with your wife, with your friendships, like you have to have those standards set in place and not to veer off of that. But when it comes to like, balance, I'm just thinking of like time management. I'm thinking about time management within my family and like what are my priorities at the end of the day, and how I'm spending my time with my kids, and am I being present with my kids? There's a difference. I mean, a lot of parents nowadays, especially, we live in a technical or technology age where they're spending time with their kids, but they're actually on their phones. They're actually on their computers. They're actually working. And so are you really spending time with your kids? So I'm present about that. I realize that. I understand that. And so there is set times where it's like I'm dedicating the 45 minutes, 2 hours, whatever that may be in a given day, where it's like I'm dedicating this time to my kids. And honestly, like you start enjoying it a lot more. You start like learning more about your kids. You start learning about their aspirations, what they like, what they don't like. It creates this whole new love. And obviously we all love our kids, but like, do you really spend quality time? Do you know your kids?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Being genuinely present sometimes needs that timer, if you will, where it's like, hey, I need to at least set a 45-minute timer just to listen to these crazy stories, because you'll find little pieces that you'll remember forever. Like my son is hilarious, and the things that he says are very quick, and you have to be very attentive to why he says things, because if you don't know the context, and it's like, oh, this kid's just all over the place, but he's like very articulate, very observant, and you have to be present there with him and kind of just see things as like himself. Paisley's the same way, very observant, asks me like the coolest questions. So being present was one of the biggest obstacles, genuinely, because everyone can say, oh, I've been present, I'm present with everyone, but then they're like thinking about work, they're thinking about investments, they're thinking about Bitcoin and stuff, like, and so much distractions nowadays. Being in marketing, you understand marketing, there's just so much, and it's like something I said where I'm trying to keep the human creative, I'm trying to keep the human in motion, if you will, with content, doing things like this. It's not to say that I'm, better than anyone. Sometimes when I used to watch podcasts, I'm like, oh, who's this guy? And what I've realized is that I do it for, myself. And I love interacting with people, and I love actually looking back. I know that sounds weird, but I love watching my old like YouTube, podcasts, just so that I can like reflect on what we said last and like build that connection. Cause it's cool. Like you get a little snapshot, like this is a snapshot of our conversation. And then, 10 years down the road, it's like, wow, like look how much we changed, hopefully for the better. And
I think as a consumer too, it's really important. Like I'm a big consumer of podcasts. I drive all the time with my current job, so I'm constantly listening to like audiobooks or podcasts. And it's not like I seek out the biggest podcasters in the world. Like there's a lot of really good podcasters out there, and I feel like everybody and their dog has a podcast now, except for me. I need to get one. But like as a consumer though, there's so many different nuggets that you can pull from people. And I just love listening to people's stories and their life, and everybody has a story. And that's what makes everybody so unique. It's like they all have the upbringing, and the upbringing kind of reflects who they are as an adult. And like I just like listening to people's stories, but there's a lot of good nuggets that you can pull from any given podcast.
That's you read my mind of like exactly what I was working on today. Ironically, was balance and why is marketing important? It's because it tells their story, right?
Yeah.
I can go to any chiropractor, they could probably crack your back, but their story is completely different.
How they got started, what their goals are. There's a whole different
right. And the biggest obstacle for me is how do I not get replaced by AI? And it always comes back to human, right? I actually love AI. I've created 1,000 dashboards for AI. I've created my own tools. And what's really cool is that it just saves my time so that I can actually connect with people a lot more. So I used to not enjoy connection with people, but now that I've realized AI is doing the work for me, now I can just focus on connecting and talking to the VFW guy, and like having a raw conversation with some old guy about faith and just connecting.
There's a clip of like Prince, the singer, back in the day. And this is like right when like the internet just boomed, and he had a saying, I might butcher this a little bit, but basically he was like, you want to use the product, you don't want the product to use you. You can't, it's a very fine line, and it's even more inundated into our lives now. Like I got 2 phones here for work. Like people have multiple phones, they're on the computer, they're constantly on YouTube or Instagram or social media, whatever it is. And it's like a lot of people become the product. They become the consumers, and it's like there's a way to utilize this technology for good, but have a balance within that.
Love it. Damn, that's a lot of... You should write a book. You know that?
I'm working on it.
Have AI write you a book.
There you go. Yeah. ChatGPT is crazy, dude. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. It is. I mean, that's a different topic. We could talk about AI and all the amazing things it can do, and also it's basically it can Google things a lot quicker. So I don't think it can think for itself, but it can Google things that seem like they're thinking for themselves.
I don't think we're very far off for it to start thinking for itself, though. Like that's a scary fine line. It's like, where are we going to be in 5 years, dude?
I comfort myself by knowing, and a lot of people say this, like in the AI world, that somebody's had to code him. So like regardless, someone has the operating tools for everything.
Yeah.
And it's the fear mongering that sells.
Yeah, but that's a good point. That like, who's creating the AI? Do they have good intentions for mankind? And that's like Elon Musk's concern. He's like, I think AI is great. I think technology is great, but is it in the right hands of those people that are creating that?
Yeah, and it's biased, obviously, coming from him, because it's like, he does some weird things. Sure. Even though, I could be political here and say, like, he's the man.
Yeah. I mean, you got to respect him. He's got like 7 companies that are like worth billions of dollars. It's like, you're lucky enough to have $1 million company, let alone $1 billion company. He's got 7. So
he's doing it.
Crushing
He's doing it. And yeah, it's funny because I think our brains are just shifting in a weird spot where, we can only see blue and red. Like almost every metaphor in every Hollywood, Matrix, for example, it wasn't an actual pill, but it's the belief system of what you believe. Because sometimes I'm like, how the hell do you believe that? Some like even like alien things, like how the hell, like how are you not faithful but you believe in aliens like a faith?
Yeah,
because you can't see it. It's just all a story.
Yeah.
It's funny because I'm trying to touch on like the faith piece too, because like that is the spiritual, human, everything that AI can't do. At least for now, we'll say that. Can't have a spiritual belief for themselves. But a lot of things that hear you say is us men, right? So what's like the biggest, because I agree with everything that you say. However, like what is men different to women in like, why are you saying those things?
Mm-hmm. It's actually really interesting. So I'm reading a book right now. It's called Wild at Heart. And John Eldridge, he's written a bunch of different books. It's a faith-based book, and he's written, I think, like 6 or 7 different books. But he is a pastor down in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And he wrote one of the books I was telling you about last time was The Beautiful Outlaw. But this book specifically, Wild at Heart, it's really made for men. And his wife wrote a book. I don't remember the exact title of that book, but that's for women. And it's very similar ties. But essentially, like God created Adam and Eve, right? And Adam was created from the earth, but the cherry on top was Eve was created from man's rib. And so you have to have the both ends. And obviously the woman has the more feminine side and the man has the more masculine side. And there's different variations, like as far as the female can have a little bit more masculinity, the male can have a little bit more femininity, but at the core of a man, there's this wild at heart feel. There's this adventure that we seek out. Like he has a good example of him being a little boy, and they went to his grandpa's ranch, and he has like this picture of him in cowboy boots. He's got a little 6-shooter, and that was like him being 6 years old, going to his papa's ranch was like the most amazing thing ever. To him, it was like the Wild Wild West. He's out there riding horses at 6. He had a whole thing made up in his mind, like he's playing out there and he's shooting Indians or he's doing whatever he's doing. And it's like, all of us, if we think back as boys, we have this wild at heart for adventure. We have this wild at heart for wilderness, for exploration. And you read the Bible, and Jesus oftentimes gets called by God to go out to the wilderness to be alone. And that too with the disciples, a lot of great mentors. Like you find yourself in adventure. You find yourself in those times, if you allow it to happen and get away from the concrete jungles of life, you find yourself in the wilderness, and you tend to find yourself in a lot deeper aspects.
Yeah, no, that's pretty awesome. I think, I guess what would be the opposing, right? Because a lot of people will see that as like, oh, only men can be adventurous. Mm-hmm. What's like the rib concept of the core then for women?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously they have those internal instincts of like a motherly instinct, that femininity. Of course, obviously, we live in an era where girls are fighting in the UFC. They have that testosterone. They have that eagerness to be in the cage, per se, as a metaphor. So it's not like a one size fits all. But I think what he's getting at is men are men at their core, and here's like their core instincts, and females here their core instincts. Now, obviously, there's different variations, but we kind of lost ourselves, especially in the 2024 era that we're in. It's like we don't know what male is, we don't know what female is, all that stuff. So don't know how political you want to get here.
Go for it.
But yeah, dude, I mean, it's just very interesting to see kind of how society has kind of evolved. And I always go back to my faith, though. I think like what God has created and how he created man versus women, we need each other. It's not a both and, it's not a and or, it's a both end. And it's really important not only for like the nuclear family to have both of those people. I mean, obviously me coming from my childhood, I was without a dad for a long time, and then I was without a mom for a long time, and that had major implications in my life that I'm still struggling with today. So it's important to have that nuclear family with a man and a wife, and yeah, it's important.
No, I think that's a great concept too, because I think you're agreeing with the same things as like your core. Why we were like our preconditions to everything. The core of a man is very similar to the other man, but the way they're like brought up will change, not the core, but like how they are with feelings, like empathy, how you can like control your emotions, a lot of traumas and stuff. That's not talking about the core. That's talking about just like the flesh, if you will. And same with like the opposite side, right? With the women, the rib and the motherly instincts, sure they can be also independent and everything, but I think I would agree that it isn't their core, to do the things that men are supposed to do, and we can't do what women are supposed to.
That's why I said we need each other at the end of the day.
Well, yeah, it's yin yang, and I look at every relationship like that, right? A relationship is obviously formed on, I think personally, more of that yin and yang piece, more of the flesh, right? The core can be the same. We can relate so much easier than a woman, right? But at the same time, I think I love hearing your finance stuff, like, your hobbies and certain things that I'm not good at. I like hearing you talk about. I'm sure it's vice versa.
From a hobby
right?
perspective, I don't feel like I'm much better at you than anything. This guy's out golfing on a Tuesday.
You're reading a lot.
I'm trying to, man. I think that I'm big on growing. Like, I have a tattoo that says the essence of life is growth, and Tony Robbins said that. And I feel like if you're not, it's cliche, if you're not growing, you're dying. And it's like I'm constantly trying to grow in different areas. And when I notice that I'm not good at something, I pursue that even harder. Like, I'm not the best reader, so I'm going to read. I'm going to make sure that I read at least 30 minutes a day. And I set timers and I set like placements in that in my life and my schedule to get better at that. Just like you with this podcast. It's like, hey, I don't feel like I'm the best speaker or this or that. So like, here I am, I'm creating a podcast. And so I have a lot of respect for you in that. It's like you're pursuing the things that you feel like you can get better at. And that's how I got to where I'm at today too. It's like I'm constantly seeking growth in every aspect of my life.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's from maturity, I think, is that now we can understand, our path. Sometimes judgment is my weakness too, of like thief of joy and like, wow, I could be getting that, but I only have this. Like, why am I doing podcasts? Why am I, not just in sales?
I think it's a lot of people right now, man.
Well, yeah.
Like, we live in this social media world where it's like, you look on social media and there's an 18-year-old kid driving a Lambo, and it's like, you have that, like, why am I not doing that? Dang. But two things, I was just having this conversation with somebody recently, but like two things, it's like one of the things is how much of the reality is that? Because a lot of times people are obviously faking those things, and everybody has their own stuff they're dealing with. Like, it's hard to be a parent. It's hard to work a 9-to-5 job. It's hard to be a single mom. It's hard to do these things. So everybody's going through their own story, man. And to your point, comparison's the thief of all joy.
Yeah, and it's also like, for me now, it's like a learning. It's like, okay, I might not have it now, but is that even what I want? And if it is, how do I pursue to get those things? It doesn't have to be the same model as that person, but how do I spin it, with my talents and with my ambitions, and how does it not take away the time I have with my kids? The biggest one, obviously, is I want, 24/7 with my kids. That's why I created this, right, is that I can do marketing at 10 p.m. when they're asleep. So it is, the blessing of that is that, I did create that. However, sometimes it's unattainable to do certain things. My overhead's extremely low because of that. So, I do need a bigger house eventually. I have, the fourth kid on the way. So it's like, it's a party.
Starting a basketball team over there.
Yeah. And it's, it's awesome right now, stay at home mom, and we're very blessed with what we got. But, there are certain material things that we do need, and I do need to provide in a lot of certain ways. But yeah, no, that, I guess going back to the 18-year-old self, like, is there anything that you would have changed? Like,
I would change a lot, dude.
Yeah. What would be like the first thing?
I wish my parents stayed together, man. I think that was like the most challenging thing for me. I mean, obviously looking back and like where I'm at today, it's like I'm grateful for everything that happened to me, because I became the man that I am today because of those things. And I probably would have been, for sure, I would have been a totally different person if my life would have went picture perfect the way I wanted to, right?
Well, let's talk about that. Because my basically every parent is divorced.
Yeah. A lot.
I've been divorced a couple times. And I think that, the way that I didn't give up, even during those times, was extremely hard, right? That was like Michael Jordan level of controlling emotions, not going in the deep end. Nobody understands it besides yourself, right? And it sounds like a squeaky wheel, because like they're like, ew, don't get your divorce on me. Like, I don't want to talk about it. Sure. So then it's like a very lonely, just kind of, you could go through self-sabotage and just realize, a lot of things about you. What I realized is that I started loving myself genuinely, and loving my own, like, actual, like, presence, which is it's like one of those things where everyone says it, but it's like, how do you do it? And I finally found it, and then I felt invincible. Like, cool, you can talk shit to me, and I don't give two.
Knowing thyself, right?
Yeah.
And like Nellie actually helped me out with this. My wife helped me out with this a lot, and because of my childhood, I always blamed it on my childhood, and I was very broken. But she's like, you're not going to be able to love anybody else unless you love yourself. And I spent years working on loving myself. And it's a task, dude. It's like an everyday task, man.
Yeah.
But with wisdom, with time, you just start to develop as a person, knowing yourself. And then I gave a lot of grace to my parents, too. It's like they were doing the best they could with what they had at that time.
Right.
And I'm kind of grateful it didn't work out because, again, they had their own issues. I'm the man that I am today. But you got to give grace to those who hurt you, forgiveness.
Yeah, and it's forgiveness and finding grace in certain situations was through loving yourself too. So like everything does come back to your like controlled emotions of like understanding like what's the next best move, right? Is it to lash out, which I've done?
Yeah.
Is it to do certain things, right? And back to having the wisdom of experience. I think that was the biggest part. You can't go through like a boot camp of divorce. Like nobody's ever done it perfect.
Yeah. It's like one of those things. Like you don't understand the love of a child, like having a child, unless you have a child.
Yeah.
It's like same thing with divorce, same thing with hardships in life. You have to almost go through these things. Now, obviously, you can get help and support from people that have done that and been through it, but you're not going to fully understand until you actually go through these things.
Right.
And like to know yourself too, like to spend quality time alone. Like how often are you guys alone? Like I would ask you that. How much time have you actually spent alone to know yourself? Like we're inundated with things and beeps and this and that notifications all the time. And we got this to do. We got that to do. We have so many things on our calendar. America's just busy, dude. Like I've really appreciated traveling out of the country because you get to experience people just being chill. Like there is no timeline. They work for a couple hours, they eat, they hang out. Community is big in other places where it's like America's, I feel like we're very broken in a lot of ways. I mean, we're missing that connection, that community, because our community is on our phone. And like one of my buddies, he spent some time in darkness retreats. So you go into these darkness retreats, you're in there in complete darkness for multiple days, and you have to learn to be okay with being in your mind. And a lot of people aren't used to that. A lot of people aren't okay with just being in their mind because our mind's a scary place, dude. Like if you sit in like a room or just a quiet place for like 10 minutes, you're thinking of 100 different things. It's hard to shut it off. Imagine sitting in a dark room for multiple days just in your mind. Like you have to learn how to love yourself.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. I think what's funny is I've never done those certain things because I think it's a Band-Aid. And so I wanted to rip the Band-Aid off as soon as possible with like stuff in my life. And I have actually done that very well where, me, like if there's something said about me, I'll directly come up to you, not as like a hard ass, but I'm like, what's the purpose of just waiting, right? We're going to talk about it eventually, I hope, right? So
that's a man's mentality too. It's like we want to fix things right away.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's why we suck at arguing with our wives.
We suck with at relationships as a whole. We want to fix everything.
Yeah.
And most times they just want you to listen.
Right.
Women want to be loved and they want to be heard.
Yeah. And the biggest like advice I would give someone is knowing that their emotions can be temporary is something I learned in my 30s, that they actually don't mean everything that they say. And to have grace with those moments, because sometimes it is looking for the reaction. Some wives more than others. And
your wife is very similar to me in the sense of like we can't hold our tongue so much sometimes.
Yeah.
And so I've grown a lot from that and learned to have patience in that and to exit the room when I'm feeling like I can't control those things. So with time, maturity, those things. But me and your wife are very similar in that.
Well, yeah, you guys are, and me and your wife are very similar in the ways that we, kind of react to certain things, and even business wise, like a lot of similarities. But yeah, I think, that's pretty good.
We're ripping.
Yeah. I know that's what's the problem. You hyper focus in these things. It's already been almost 40 minutes.
What are the normal podcast lengths?
The last one was 17.
17 minutes?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. It's a good one, dude.
Yeah. I know and that's what's cool about these is that, you just get in the movement and obviously I'll have you on this podcast. I think it's a good stopping point, but lots of nuggets, lots of, thanks for doing this.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Hopefully there's still things we can talk about next time.
Plenty of stuff.
We touched everything.
Yeah.
Maybe more politics, maybe some face stuff, and go from there. But
I hope your listeners got some value out of it today.
yeah, well, thanks for being on.
Appreciate it.